The crackle of snow under worn boots broke the wilderness silence as Ethan Morgan carried his newly purchased food supplies toward his isolated cabin. A seasoned hunter who preferred solitude to society, he never expected to find himself thrust into someone else's tragedy. When the wooden box he'd bargained for emitted a soft whimper instead of the preserved meats he'd paid for, Ethan discovered a days-old infant swaddled in dirty linen, barely clinging to life. With blizzard winds howling outside and the nearest settlement a 3-day journey through treacherous mountain passes, his survival skills would face their greatest test yet. Who would abandon their child in a food box, and what desperate circumstances drove them to such a devastating choice? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Ethan's hands trembled as he placed the wooden box on his cabin table, the infant's weak cries barely audible above the howling blizzard outside. 20 years in these mountains had prepared him for many emergencies, but never this. He stoked the fire to a roar, the dancing flames revealing his weathered face creased with concern. "Hold on, little one," he whispered, voice raspy from disuse. His medical instincts, long dormant, flooded back. He'd been Dr. Ethan Morgan once, before grief drove him to this solitary existence. Now, he assessed the infant with practiced eyes, severely hypothermic, dehydrated, days old at most. A girl, he realized, her tiny fingers bluish and cold. Working methodically, Ethan warmed water and soaked clean rags in it. He gently unwrapped the dirty swaddling, discovering a small cloth medallion sewn into a corner, an embroidered winter rose with the letter W beneath it. His first clue to her identity, though it meant nothing to him now. "Your mother left you something at least," he murmured, carefully setting the medallion aside. The cabin, built for one reclusive man, contained nothing for infant care. Ethan improvised. He cleaned her with warmed cloths, wrapped her in one of his softest flannel shirts, and created a nest near the fire using his winter furs. For feeding, he mixed melted snow with the smallest amount of honey he had preserved, using an eyedropper from his old medical kit to place tiny drops into her mouth. Throughout the night, he maintained vigilance, remembering another night years ago when he had failed to save his wife Sarah and their unborn child. The memory pierced him freshly as he watched this abandoned infant struggle for each breath. "Not this time," he promised the darkness. "Not this one." By morning, the baby's color had improved slightly. The blizzard outside had intensified, sealing them together for days to come. Ethan realized with startling clarity that his life had irrevocably changed. The isolation he had cultivated was shattered by 7 pounds of fragile humanity. He rummaged through his few possessions, finding an old wooden bowl he could repurpose as a basin. Sitting by the fire, he began carving a small spoon from a piece of pine, his large hands working with surprising delicacy. The familiar rhythm of carving calmed him, bringing focus to his scattered thoughts. "I don't know who left you or why," he told the sleeping infant, "but they chose wrong when they picked my box to hide in." The spoon took shape beneath his knife, small, smooth, with a shallow bowl perfect for the diluted milk mixture he'd created from his limited supplies. His first deliberate creation for her, a commitment taking physical form. When the baby finally accepted a full feeding from his improvised spoon, Ethan felt something crack within his chest. A fissure in the wall he'd built around himself since Sarah's death. The infant's tiny hand wrapped around his finger as she suckled, and the simple trust in the gesture made his vision blur. "You need a proper cradle," he told her gruffly, blinking away the unexpected moisture in his eyes. "Can't have you sleeping in furs like some wilderness creature." That afternoon, while she slept, he dismantled one of his storage drawers, repurposing the wood into a simple cradle. His movements grew more certain with each passing hour, the initial panic subsiding into purposeful action. By nightfall, when the baby awoke crying with hunger, Ethan had transformed a corner of his one-room cabin into a makeshift nursery. The wooden spoon gleamed from its first use, and the cradle stood ready beside his bed. "We'll figure this out," he promised as she settled after feeding. "Once this storm passes, we'll find where you belong." But as he spoke the words, Ethan felt an unexpected reluctance. The thought of returning this child to whoever had abandoned her in a food box during a blizzard sat uneasily with him. The medallion suggested a story, perhaps a desperate mother, a family in trouble, or something darker he didn't yet understand. He placed a calloused finger against her cheek, marveling at the softness there. "For now you're safe," he whispered. "That's what matters." Outside, the blizzard raged, snow piling against the cabin walls, creating a cocoon of isolation that, for the first time in years, Ethan didn't welcome. Somewhere beyond that wall of white was the truth of this child's origins, and whatever danger had led to her abandonment. The infant slept peacefully now, her breathing stronger. Ethan settled into his chair by the fire, knife in hand, already carving another implement for her care. The simple wooden spoon rested on the table, his first gift to her, the first acknowledgement that, ready or not, he had become her protector. 3 days later, the blizzard finally exhausted itself. Ethan stood at his cabin door, surveying the transformed landscape. Pristine white stretched in every direction, the morning sun creating a blinding brilliance. The infant, bundled securely against his chest in a sling fashioned from one of his flannel shirts, made soft cooing sounds. "First time out, little one," he murmured. "Let's see if we can find some answers." Ethan had examined the wooden box thoroughly during their confinement, discovering a false bottom that had escaped his initial inspection. Hidden within was a torn page from what appeared to be a merchant's ledger. The neat columns contained coded entries, dates, locations, and cryptic notes about deliveries, with numbers instead of descriptions. One entry was circled, "Package 7W to Fort Clearwater. Special handling, premium payment received." The date matched 3 days before Ethan had purchased the box. Now, with the baby secure against him and snowshoes strapped to his feet, Ethan followed the merchant's trail backward. The heavy snowfall had nearly obscured all signs of passage, but Ethan's experienced eyes caught the telltale marks where branches had been recently broken and snow compressed. Beneath the fresh powder, after an hour's careful tracking, he discovered an abandoned camp nestled in a protected ravine. Evidence of multiple travelers, not just the merchant Silas Webb from whom he'd purchased the box. Fire pits showed at least 3 separate fires, unusual for a solitary trader. "Popular fellow, your merchant," Ethan told the baby, who had fallen asleep against his warmth. A shout from the ridge above startled him. "Morgan, that you down there?" Ethan recognized the voice of Haskell, an elderly trapper whose territory overlapped with his own. They'd shared fires occasionally over the years, maintaining the distant camaraderie of men who preferred solitude. "Haskell," Ethan acknowledged, watching the older man navigate the slope with practiced ease despite his 70-odd years. Haskell's eyes widened at the sight of the bundle against Ethan's chest. "Since when did you take to babysitting, Morgan?" Ethan's mind raced. "My sister's child," he lied smoothly. "Message reached me last week. Influenza took her and her husband." Haskell's weathered face softened. "Didn't know you had family." "Not anymore," Ethan said, the words carrying an unintended truth. Haskell nodded toward the abandoned camp. "Looking for Webb? Shifty character. You know him?" "Know of him. Runs supplies up from Fort Clearwater, but that's not all he trades in, if you take my meaning." Haskell spat into the snow. "Connected to some powerful folks down at the fort. Judge Winterfield's people use him for special deliveries." Ethan kept his expression neutral despite the jolt of interest. "Any idea where he was headed?" "Normally circles back to the fort after his northern route. But I heard rumors." Haskell glanced at the baby, lowering his voice. "Children gone missing from settlements. Nothing proven, mind you. Just talk." The baby stirred against Ethan's chest, whimpering softly. Her skin felt warmer than it should. "She unwell?" Haskell asked, genuine concern creasing his leathery face. "Might be." Ethan's medical instincts sparked with worry. A fever in an infant this young, in these conditions, dangerous. Haskell rummaged in his pack. "Got willow bark. My rheumatism medicine, but it'll bring down her fever. And some goat's milk preserved with honey. Better than whatever you've been giving her, I'd wager." Ethan accepted the offerings gratefully. Any other signs of Webb's companions? One was city folk for certain. Fine boots, left a handkerchief by the stream. Monogrammed with an H. Haskell shrugged. "Mean anything to you?" Ethan shook his head, though he carefully filed the information away. "I should get her back. The fever." "Go on then," Haskell nodded. "Stop by my cabin when she's better. 3 miles east of here. Got more supplies you might need for a little one." As Ethan hurried back toward his cabin, the baby's fever climbing, his mind worked through the fragments of information. A merchant with connections to powerful people. Coded ledger. Missing children. And package 7W. Could the W connect to the medallion's embroidered letter? The infant whimpered against him, her discomfort escalating. Ethan picked up his pace, the mystery temporarily overshadowed by immediate concern for her health. The wooden box and its secrets would have to wait. First, he needed to get her fever down. "Hold on," he whispered, one large hand cradling her small head protectively. "We'll sort this out together, little one." The forest around them stood silent in its winter shroud, bearing witness to the unlikely pair, the reclusive hunter and the abandoned infant. As they made their way back to safety, unaware of the dangerous attention their bond would soon attract, night fell as Ethan tended to the feverish infant. Haskell's willow bark tea, administered in tiny drops, gradually brought her temperature down. By morning, her skin had cooled to normal, her breathing deep and regular once more. Exhausted from his vigil, Ethan watched her sleep in the makeshift cradle, relief washing over him in palpable waves. "You're a fighter," he whispered. "Good. You'll need that." As dawn light filtered through frost-covered windows, Ethan confronted an uncomfortable truth. He'd begun thinking of the child as something more than a temporary responsibility. Each time he fed her, each whimper he soothed, each moment of connection forged another link between them. She needed a name, not just little one or baby, but something that acknowledged her as a person, someone with identity and place in the world. His world, at least for now. Ethan moved to the far corner of the cabin, to a trunk he rarely opened. The lock was stiff from disuse, the hinges protesting as he raised the lid. Inside lay carefully wrapped bundles, all that remained of his life before the wilderness. Sarah's things, preserved like artifacts from another man's existence. His hands trembled slightly as he unwrapped a small cloth package, revealing a silver hair comb. Sarah had worn it on their wedding day, the delicate floral pattern catching sunlight as she'd smiled at him. He'd planned to give it to their daughter someday. "Emma," he said aloud, the name surfacing from memory. His mother's name. Strong, simple, enduring. He carried the comb to the cradle, studying the sleeping infant. "Emma," he repeated, testing how it felt. The baby stirred, tiny eyelids fluttering open. For a moment, her unfocused gaze seemed to meet his, and something settled in Ethan's chest. "Emma it is, then." Carefully, he placed the silver comb atop the wooden chest containing Sarah's things. A promise, a connection between what might have been and what unexpectedly was. With new purpose, Ethan returned to examining the baby's, Emma's, original swaddling clothes. The fabric quality suggested wealth, the stitching fine and even. The embroidered medallion with its winter rose and W was the work of skilled hands. These weren't the belongings of desperate poverty, but rather of someone with means. Someone who could afford to ensure their child had quality garments, even while abandoning her in a wilderness merchant's box. "What happened to your mother, Emma?" he wondered aloud. What drove her to such measures? The implications troubled him. If Emma came from wealth or position, powerful people might be searching for her, or worse, might have been responsible for her abandonment in the first place. Haskell's comments about Webb's connections to Judge Winterfield in Fort Clearwater took on new significance. Ethan had avoided civilization for years, healing his wounds in isolation after Sarah's death. The thought of returning to a place like Fort Clearwater, with its politics and social hierarchies, made his stomach tighten. Yet if he wanted answers about Emma's origins, he would need to confront the very world he'd fled. He spent the afternoon converting a drawer into a more substantial cradle, lining it with soft furs, and using Sarah's shawl as a blanket. His hands worked steadily, shaping wood with practiced precision while his mind grappled with decisions. "Spring thaw is 6 weeks away," he told Emma as she watched him from her nest of blankets, her dark eyes seeming impossibly alert. "That's when we can safely travel to Fort Clearwater. Find out who you belong to." The words brought an unexpected ache. Who did she belong to? The people who had placed her in a box during winter's harshest month? Or the man who had found her, who was now carving her a proper place in his home? "We'll do what's right," he promised, though he wasn't entirely certain what that meant anymore. That evening, as he fed Emma her bedtime meal, a sound outside the cabin froze him mid-motion, the distinct crunch of approaching footsteps in snow. Someone had found his isolated home, despite the fresh snowfall covering all tracks. Ethan quickly placed Emma in her cradle, positioning it in the shadows farthest from the door. He took down his rifle from its pegs, checking that it was loaded before moving to the window. Through frost-rimmed glass, he made out a solitary figure approaching. A man in an official-looking coat, a badge catching the last light of day. "A marshal," Ethan muttered. "This far into the wilderness?" Emma made a soft sound from her hiding place. Ethan moved to quiet her, mind racing. No one had any reason to send law enforcement to his door, unless they were looking for something. Or someone. The heavy knock that followed confirmed his fears. His solitude was shattered, and whatever storm had delivered Emma to him was about to break in full force. Ethan tucked his rifle just out of sight behind the door before opening it, revealing a tall man whose clean-shaven face and immaculate coat seemed at odds with the wilderness surroundings. "Evening," Ethan said, keeping his voice neutral. "Long way from anywhere, Marshal." The man's eyes, cold and calculating, swept over Ethan before trying to peer into the cabin beyond. "Territorial Marshal Blackwood. Mind if I step in? Been tracking through snow for hours." Ethan hesitated only briefly before stepping aside. Refusal would only raise suspicion. "What brings law enforcement to these parts?" Blackwood stomped snow from his boots before entering. "Fugitive woman. Killed her husband back in Fort Clearwater. Fled north." His gaze methodically catalogued every detail of the cabin's interior. "Pregnant. Last seen about 2 weeks ago. Thought she might seek shelter in these parts." Ethan kept his expression impassive despite the jolt of connection. A pregnant woman on the run, the timing matching Emma's apparent age. "Haven't seen anyone. Storms kept me cabin-bound past week." "Mind if I warm myself?" Blackwood moved toward the fire without waiting for permission, positioning himself to better view the cabin's far corners. "Help yourself." Ethan busied himself at the stove, deliberately creating noise to cover any sounds Emma might make. "Coffee? Appreciate it." Blackwood removed his gloves, revealing manicured hands that had seen little labor. "You live alone out here, Morgan?" The use of his name without introduction didn't escape Ethan's notice. "People generally do in these mountains." "Generally," Blackwood agreed, his attention fixing on the wooden box that had contained Emma, now serving as a storage container on Ethan's shelf. "Interesting piece. Recent acquisition. Traded with a merchant passing through before the storm. Needed provisions." Ethan placed a steaming cup before the marshal, noting how the man's gaze lingered on the newly constructed cradle tucked in the shadows. Merchant named Webb, by chance? Didn't catch his name. Ethan lied smoothly. Just his goods. Blackwood sipped his coffee, eyes never ceasing their assessment. Strange hobby for a solitary hunter. He nodded toward the cradle. Dollhouse furniture? A sudden, muffled cough escaped Ethan before he could stop it. Woodworking passes the winter hours. Sells well at the trading post come spring. He coughed again, more forcefully, covering the tiny sound that had emanated from Emma's hiding place. Blackwood's eyebrow arched slightly. Seems you caught something in that storm. Nothing serious, Ethan replied, silently willing Emma to remain quiet. The marshal finished his coffee in a single swallow and stood. I'll continue my search at first light. If you happen to see a young woman, Clara Winters is her name, you're obligated to report it immediately. She's dangerous and unwell. I'll keep watch, Ethan assured him, moving toward the door. Blackwood paused before exiting. One more thing, Morgan. The woman's child, if born, is considered evidence in a capital case. Harboring either would make you an accessory. His eyes hardened. Judge Winterfield is personally interested in this matter. He doesn't take interference lightly. Noted, Ethan said, maintaining his neutral expression despite the name confirming his suspicions about the W embroidered on Emma's medallion. After Blackwood departed, Ethan waited tensely, watching through the window until the marshal disappeared into the tree line. Only then did he rush to Emma's side, finding her awake but mercifully quiet, tiny fists waving in the air. Good girl, he whispered, lifting her gently. Smart to stay quiet. His relief was short-lived. Upon returning to clear the marshal's cup, Ethan noticed something beneath the chair where Blackwood had sat, a territorial marshal's badge, partially visible as if accidentally dropped. The staged nature of the oversight was immediately clear. A warning, a message that he'd be back. More troubling was what Ethan discovered when he stepped outside to check the marshal's departure trail. A folded paper had fallen from Blackwood's saddlebag, perhaps truly accidental, given its positioning. Ethan retrieved it, finding a wanted poster with a skillfully rendered likeness of a young woman. Clara Winters, it proclaimed, wanted for the murder of her husband Thomas Reed and the kidnapping of a child belonging to her legal guardian, Judge Winterfield. The picture showed a refined beauty with intelligent eyes that somehow seemed familiar, though Ethan couldn't place why. He studied the poster by firelight after securing his cabin. The charges made little sense. How could she have kidnapped her own child? And legal guardian suggested Clara was quite young or considered incompetent in some way. Emma fussed in her cradle, drawing Ethan from his thoughts. As he lifted her, he noticed something he'd missed before. Her eyes, now focusing better at nearly 2 weeks of age, were a distinctive shade of gray-blue that matched those of the woman in the poster. Your mother, he murmured to Emma, the pieces beginning to align. She didn't abandon you willingly, did she? She was running. The implications settled heavily. If Clara Winters was Emma's mother, and Judge Winterfield was pursuing her with territorial marshals, Emma wasn't simply an abandoned infant. She was at the center of something far more dangerous than Ethan had imagined. We can't stay here, he told her softly. Blackwood will be back, and next time he won't come alone. Ethan worked through the night, preparing for their escape. He packed only essentials: dried meat, hard biscuits, medical supplies, extra clothing, fire-starting tools, and his most critical hunting implements. Everything had to fit in one pack he could carry while keeping Emma secure against his chest. We'll travel light, he told her as she watched him with solemn eyes. Move faster that way. He burned Clara's wanted poster in the fire, committing her face to memory instead. The wooden box that had delivered Emma to him, he left prominently displayed. Let Blackwood waste time searching it again. But the ledger page from its false bottom, Ethan tucked safely inside his coat. Most importantly, He eliminated all evidence of Emma's presence. The cradle he dismantled and added to the firewood. Her swaddling clothes he buried beneath the floorboards, keeping only the medallion with its embroidered W as proof of her identity. By dawn, his cabin appeared exactly as it should for a solitary hunter. No infant, no preparations for one, nothing to suggest Emma had ever been there. They departed in the coldest hour before sunrise, when even the most dedicated trackers would be seeking warmth. Ethan wore snowshoes, carrying Emma in a sling beneath his coat where his body heat would keep her warm. His medical training guided his preparations. A mixture of goat's milk and melted snow kept cool in a flask so it wouldn't spoil, clean cloths for her needs, a small vial of willow bark extract for fever. "We've done this before, you and I," he reminded himself, thinking of his time as a field medic during frontier skirmishes years ago. The skills returned readily: how to move silently, how to cover tracks, how to navigate without obvious trails. Rather than heading toward any settlement or trading post where Blackwood might inquire, Ethan struck west toward higher elevations. He knew of cave systems there, used occasionally by local tribes for ceremonial purposes, but largely avoided by white settlers who found the terrain too challenging. The morning passed in careful progress, Ethan frequently checking that Emma remained warm enough against him. Despite the circumstances, he felt a familiar clarity that had been missing from his isolated existence. The focus that came with having someone dependent on his skills, his decisions. Emma's survival now hinged entirely on him, a responsibility that sharpened every sense. By midday, they'd climbed high enough that Ethan could look back across the valley. Two thin columns of smoke rose in the distance, one from his cabin, the other likely from Blackwood's camp. Soon enough, the marshal would realize his quarry had fled. "He'll expect us to head toward civilization," Ethan told Emma during a brief rest. "We'll do the opposite." The afternoon brought heavier snow, both blessing and curse. Covered their tracks but made travel more arduous. Ethan pressed on, driven by the certainty that discovery meant death. If not for him, then almost certainly for the infant who represented some threat to Judge Winterfield's plans. As dusk approached, Ethan reached the cave entrance he sought, a narrow opening partially concealed by wind-twisted pines. In his hunting days, he'd used this place as a blind, watching for mountain sheep on the slopes above. Its entrance was small enough to be easily defended, opening to a chamber of surprising size within. "Home for now," he told Emma as he carefully maneuvered them inside. The cave offered immediate shelter from the wind. Ethan quickly established their camp, a small fire set back from the entrance to minimize visible smoke, bedding arranged to maximize warmth, supplies organized for efficiency. Years of wilderness survival had taught him how to create comfort in the most austere conditions. As he settled Emma for her evening feeding, a flash of color caught his eye among her bundled blankets. Something he hadn't noticed before. A small brass compass tucked into the folds of her swaddling. Ethan examined it carefully, finding it to be of fine quality with a decorative outer case. Curious, he tried to open it, discovering that the case contained not just a compass but a hidden compartment. Inside lay a miniature portrait of a young woman, Clara Winters, her eyes unmistakably like Emma's, but her expression far more confident than in the wanted poster. She wore elegant attire and a defiant half-smile that suggested strength of character. "Your mother left you more than I realized," Ethan murmured to Emma. Further examination revealed an inscription on the compass's inner lid. "To Clara, may you always find your true north. With love, Tr. Tr." Ethan repeated thoughtfully. Thomas Reed, perhaps? The husband she supposedly murdered. The compass represented something significant, not an item casually included, but deliberately hidden with Emma as a message or memento. It suggested planning, foresight, a desperate mother trying to provide her child with both protection and identity, even as she placed her in a merchant's box. "She never intended to abandon you," Ethan told Emma with growing certainty. "She was trying to save you." Outside, The wind carried the first howls of wolves in the distance. Ethan checked his rifle and settled in for a vigilant night, the compass clutched in one hand, Emma sleeping peacefully beside him. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, but for tonight, they had shelter, warmth, and the first real clues to the mystery surrounding Emma's birth. Dawn brought clear skies and plummeting temperatures. Ethan ventured carefully from the cave to survey their surroundings, relieved to find no signs of pursuit. The previous day's snowfall had transformed the landscape, erasing their trail completely. "We need supplies," he told Emma after returning to their shelter. "Can't live on what we have for more than a few days." He studied the crude map he'd scratched into the dirt floor of the cave. 2 days' journey northwest lay the Beaulieu trading post, a remote outpost run by a French-Canadian couple who kept to themselves and asked few questions. Ethan had traded with them occasionally, finding Pierre Beaulieu fair if not particularly friendly. "It's a risk," he admitted to Emma as he bundled her against him, "but a calculated one." They traveled cautiously, Ethan constantly vigilant for signs of other humans. Emma remained remarkably quiet throughout their journey, as if sensing the need for silence. By nightfall of the second day, the small cluster of buildings that comprised the Beaulieu trading post came into view, smoke rising steadily from the main cabin's chimney. Ethan approached openly, knowing that tempting stealth would only raise suspicion. As he neared, the door opened, revealing Marie Beaulieu's stout figure silhouetted against the interior light. "Monsieur Morgan," she called, her French accent thick but welcoming. "It has been many months, non?" "Too many, Madame Beaulieu," Ethan replied, climbing the steps to the porch. Her eyes widened at the sight of the bundle against his chest. "And who is this petite Ange?" "My niece," Ethan maintained his established story. "Her mother passed recently." Marie's expression softened immediately. "Bring her inside, out of this cold. Pierre, we have guests." The trading post's main room served as both store and living quarters, warmed by a massive stone fireplace. Pierre Beaulieu emerged from the back room, his perpetual scowl softening slightly at the sight of Ethan. "Morgan, unexpected." His gaze fell to Emma. "And with company." Marie had already bustled forward, arms outstretched. "Let me see the child. I have birthed 5 of my own and helped with countless others." Ethan hesitated only briefly before surrendering Emma to Marie's experienced hands. The woman unwrapped her with practiced efficiency, examining her with a midwife's trained eye. "Born early, this one," she declared, "but strong. Good color now, though she was troubled at birth, I think." She glanced sharply at Ethan. "You have been feeding her properly?" "Doing my best," Ethan said. "Goat's milk with honey water." Marie nodded approvingly. "You have some knowledge, then. Good. But she needs more. I have dried goat's milk that will serve better, and proper cloths for swaddling." While Marie tended to Emma, Pierre set food before Ethan. A hearty stew that reminded him how inadequately he'd been eating since finding Emma. As he ate, their teenage son Thomas entered, his curious gaze immediately fixing on the baby in his mother's arms. "A baby? Here?" he exclaimed. "Morgan's niece," Pierre said shortly. "None of your concern." But Thomas seemed unable to contain himself. "Is she from Fort Clearwater? I heard there was trouble there. A lady running away from her father." Ethan's spoon paused midway to his mouth. "What lady?" "I don't know her name," Thomas shrugged. "But when that merchant Webb came through last month, he had fancy men with him. Not trappers or traders. City men with good coats." "Thomas," Pierre warned, "your mouth runs faster than river in spring." But Ethan had already set down his spoon. "Webb was here? Recently?" 3 weeks past," Marie confirmed while deftly changing Emma's wrappings. "With unusual companions, as Thomas says. One man particularly, very fine clothes, gold watch chain." He spoke with authority. "Did you hear a name?" Ethan asked casually. "None," Marie replied. But Thomas found something by the creek after they departed. Show him, Thomas. The boy disappeared briefly, returning with a folded newspaper. They left these from the territorial capital. Ethan accepted the papers, scanning them with apparent casualness while his heart raced. The social pages contained an article about Judge Winterfield's daughter's marriage the previous year. A controversial match, it seemed, with the daughter defying her father's wishes to marry a young doctor instead of the judge's business partner. A small portrait accompanied the article, showing Clara Winters, the same face as in the Compass miniature and wanted poster, standing beside a handsome young man identified as Dr. Thomas Reed. The article mentioned the judge's profound disappointment and noted that the couple had since left Fort Clearwater, presumably to establish a practice elsewhere. Interesting reading? Pierre asked, his tone suggesting he'd noticed Ethan's intense focus. Just catching up on news, Ethan replied, folding the paper. Been isolated for months. A sudden commotion outside drew their attention, horses approaching at speed. Pierre moved to the window, his expression darkening. Marshal, he muttered. Territorial badge. Marie reacted instantly, scooping up Emma. Follow me, she hissed to Ethan. Quickly. She led him to a trapdoor concealed beneath a rug, revealing a small cellar used for storing perishable goods. Down, she ordered. Pierre will handle this. As Ethan descended, cradling Emma close, he heard Pierre greeting Blackwood at the door. Marie joined them above, pulling the rug back over the trapdoor. Looking for a man traveling with an infant, Blackwood's voice filtered through the floorboards. Morgan is his name. Ethan Morgan. No one by that name here, Pierre's voice replied steadily. There's a substantial reward, Blackwood continued. The child was stolen from Judge Winterfield's family. A terrible crime. From his hiding place, Ethan held Emma tighter, her small warmth a contrast to the cold cellar air. Above, the conversation continued, with Blackwood describing Ethan and Emma with disturbing accuracy. The marshal knew exactly who and what he was looking for. Ethan and Emma remained motionless in the cellar for what felt like hours, though likely only 40 minutes passed before the trapdoor lifted. Marie's face appeared, her expression grim. He is gone, she whispered, but will return. He does not believe Pierre. Ethan climbed out, Emma secure against him. Thank you. I know the risk you've taken. Marie's eyes softened as she looked at Emma. Some risks are worth taking, Monsieur Morgan. She pressed a small package into his hands. Milk powder, clean cloths, medicine for fever. And this? She hesitated before producing a folded piece of paper from her apron pocket. A map to Widow Gardner's place. 3 hours northeast if you travel through the night. Widow Gardner? Ethan asked. She helps those who need to disappear, Pierre explained, entering from the front room. Especially women. Marie nodded. The marshal offered $50 for information about you. He claims the baby belongs to Judge Winterfield's family. She doesn't, Ethan said firmly. Her mother is Clara Winters, the judge's daughter. The marshal is lying. The Beaulieus exchanged glances. We suspected as much, Marie said. That is why we suggest Widow Gardner. She may know more. She helps many women in trouble. The marshal said he would check all nearby cabins tomorrow, Pierre added. You cannot stay. Thomas appeared from the back room, excitement lighting his young face. I can show you the back trail. No one uses it in winter. Despite Pierre's protests, Thomas guided Ethan through the darkness behind the trading post, showing him a narrow path that wound through dense pine forests. The widow doesn't welcome men usually, the boy explained. But if you mention Marie sent you, she might help. With sincere thanks and a promise to repay their kindness someday, Ethan departed, following Thomas's directions through the moonlit forest. Emma, remarkably, slept soundly against his chest, apparently comforted by his steady heartbeat. The journey took longer than 3 hours, the trail frequently disappearing beneath snow drifts. Dawn was breaking when Ethan finally spotted a small cabin nestled against a hillside, smoke curling from its chimney. A rough fence surrounded a small livestock pen containing 2 goats and several chickens protected from the cold in a sturdy coop. Approaching cautiously, Ethan called out before reaching the cabin door. "Hello, the house. Marie Beaulieu sent me." The door cracked open, revealing the barrel of a shotgun before a woman's weathered face appeared behind it. She was perhaps 60, with silver hair pulled tightly back and eyes that had witnessed much hardship. "State your business," she demanded, keeping the shotgun steady. "I need shelter," Ethan replied honestly. "For myself and this child." He opened his coat slightly to reveal Emma. The woman's expression didn't soften, but her gaze sharpened with interest. "Where'd you get that baby?" "Found her in a trader's box. Her mother is Clara Winters. A marshal named Blackwood is hunting us." At Clara's name, the widow's demeanor changed subtly. She lowered the shotgun slightly. "Let me see the child." Ethan remained where he stood. "I'll show you, but I won't hand her over until I know we're safe." A glimmer of approval crossed the woman's face. "Smart man." She stepped back. "Come in then. But know that I keep this shotgun loaded." The cabin's interior was surprisingly comfortable, clean, well-organized, with shelves of preserved foods and medicinal herbs. A heavy loom occupied one corner, half-finished cloth stretched across its frame. "I'm Catherine Gardner," the woman said, setting her shotgun within easy reach. "Now let me see this child you claim is Clara's." Ethan carefully unwrapped Emma, revealing her face and the medallion he'd kept with her. This was sewn into her swaddling clothes. Widow Gardner examined the medallion, her stoic expression cracking slightly. "The Winterfield rose," she murmured. "Clara wore this when she came to me 6 months ago." "Then you did know her," Ethan said, relief flooding through him. Catherine nodded, gently touching Emma's cheek. "She stayed here 3 weeks while her husband established their new home farther north. She was just beginning to show then, for months along." The older woman looked up at Ethan sharply. "How did you come to find her child?" Ethan explained everything. The merchant web, the wooden box, Blackwood's pursuit, and the clues he'd gathered about Clara and Thomas Reed's fate. "Judge Winterfield disowned Clara when she refused to marry Frederick Hargrove," Catherine confirmed. "But Hargrove remained obsessed with her, and the judge couldn't accept her defiance. When Clara discovered she was pregnant, she feared for her child's safety. She left this with me." The widow moved to a loose floorboard, retrieving a sealed envelope which she handed to Ethan. Inside was a handwritten letter in elegant script. "My dearest Thomas, if you are reading this, something has prevented our reunion. Our child grows stronger each day within me, a miracle that brings me joy even amid danger. Father will never stop searching. The inheritance from my grandmother's estate passes only through direct bloodline, and a child of mine threatens his control. Hargrove helps him because he cannot bear that I chose you instead. I go north to the mission at River Point where we plan to meet. If I am not there, search for our child. I swear I would never willingly abandon our baby. With eternal love, Clara." Ethan read the letter twice, each word confirming his growing suspicions. "When was this written?" 3 months ago," Catherine replied. Clara was determined to rejoin her husband at the mission settlement. Thomas had secured a position as their doctor. Her expression darkened. "I warned her it was too dangerous to travel in her condition, but she insisted." A rider passed slowly by the cabin, causing them both to freeze. Through the window, Ethan glimpsed an unfamiliar man surveying the property before continuing onward. "Blackwood's men are searching the area," Catherine said quietly. "You cannot stay beyond tonight. But there's something else you should know about Clara." "What?" Ethan prompted when she hesitated. "She believed someone was poisoning her. Small doses over time. She suspected Hargrove had hired someone to ensure she would lose the baby." Catherine's eyes filled with rare emotion. That child you hold is a fighter, to have survived all that. Catherine insisted Ethan rest while she watched over Emma, her weathered hands displaying surprising gentleness as she tended to the infant. Despite his exhaustion, Ethan found sleep elusive, his mind churning with the revelations about Clara and the dangers still pursuing them. You need to reach the mission at River Point, Catherine told him when he finally emerged from his brief rest. It's a 3-day journey from here, if the weather holds. She provided detailed directions, marking a crude map with sheltered locations where he could safely camp overnight. Father Michaels runs the mission. He's a good man, though cautious. Tell him I sent you. They departed at dusk, Catherine pressing additional supplies into Ethan's hands. More milk powder, a thicker blanket for Emma, and dried meat for the journey. Clara would be grateful, she said simply, touching Emma's cheek one last time. The journey to River Point tested Ethan's endurance. Winter maintained its grip on the higher elevations, forcing them to navigate treacherous passes and ice-covered streams. Emma developed a slight cough that kept Ethan vigilant, checking her frequently for fever and adjusting her wrappings to protect her from the biting wind. On the 3rd day, as afternoon light waned, they crested a ridge overlooking a narrow river valley. Below, the River Point mission stood as a cluster of simple wooden buildings surrounding a small chapel with a cross atop its steeple. Smoke rose from several chimneys, promising warmth within. Ethan approached openly, carrying Emma in plain sight. A bell rang somewhere within the mission as he neared the main gate, bringing a white-haired priest hurrying out to meet them. "Welcome, traveler," the elderly man called, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "I am Father Michaels. You come at a difficult time, but all are welcome at River Point." "Thank you, Father," Ethan replied. "I'm Ethan Morgan. Catherine Gardner directed me here. I seek information about a woman named Clara Winters who may have come here recently." Father Michaels's welcoming expression faltered momentarily. "Perhaps we should speak inside." His gaze lingered on Emma. "And the child?" "Needs warmth," Ethan said, deliberately vague. The priest led them to his quarters adjacent to the chapel, a Spartan room warmed by a small stove. He gestured for Ethan to sit while studying Emma with undisguised interest. "How old is this child?" he asked softly. "Nearly 3 weeks," Ethan answered, watching the priest's reaction carefully. "Born during the last full moon." Father Michaels closed his eyes briefly, as if in prayer. "May I?" he asked, extending his hands toward Emma. Reluctantly, Ethan allowed the priest to hold her. Father Michaels examined her with gentle care, his expression softening as Emma grasped his finger. "She has her mother's eyes," he whispered, almost to himself. "Then Clara was here," Ethan confirmed. The priest nodded slowly, returning Emma to Ethan's arms. She arrived in terrible condition, exhausted, ill, the journey having taken its toll. She was already in labor, though it was too early. His hands trembled slightly. "We did what we could." "And her husband?" "Thomas Reed." Pain crossed the priest's features. "He arrived the day after Clara, having received word she was here. He was a skilled physician, took charge of her care immediately." "What happened?" Ethan pressed when the priest fell silent. "Men came," Father Michaels said, his voice dropping. 4 days after the baby's birth. They claimed to be representatives of Judge Winterfield, coming to escort his daughter home. His eyes darkened with remembered fear. Dr. Reed refused to let them near Clara or the child. There was a confrontation in the chapel. Shots were fired. "Thomas Reed was killed," Ethan stated, seeing the confirmation in the priest's expression. "Before my eyes," Father Michaels whispered. "I administered last rites as he died. Clara, still weak from childbirth, fled with the infant during the confusion. One of our indigenous helpers, Waking Dove, assisted her." He looked directly at Ethan. How did you come to have the child? Ethan explained briefly about the merchant's box and his subsequent discoveries. Webb, the priest spat the name like a curse. He came here afterward, claiming to offer Clara assistance. She was desperate enough to trust him, having few options. Where was Clara taking Emma? There is a couple in Fort Clearwater, the Prestons. Friends of Thomas who had arranged to care for the child until Clara could escape the territory entirely. Father Michaels shook his head. Webb was supposed to deliver the baby to them. Clara planned to lead her pursuers away, then circle back once they were safe. The priest moved to a cabinet, removing a heavy book, the mission's baptismal record. He opened it carefully, pointing to several pages where entries appeared to have been deliberately smudged or removed. They forced me to alter these records, he admitted shamefully, to remove any evidence that Clara or her child had been here. But look! He produced a magnifying glass, holding it over the damaged page. Under magnification, Ethan could make out traces of Clara's name and a partial entry for a female infant baptized the day before Thomas Reed's death. I performed the baptism myself, Father Michaels said. Dr. Reed and a young indigenous woman named Waking Dove stood as godparents. Where is Waking Dove now? Ethan asked. She remains here, though she rarely speaks of what happened. Too painful. The priest hesitated. Would you like to meet her? She was with Clara until the end. Knows more than I do about the final arrangements with Webb. Yes, Ethan agreed immediately. As Father Michaels rose to find Waking Dove, a commotion erupted outside. Horses arriving, men's voices calling out demands. The priest rushed to the window, his face paling. Marshal Blackwood, he whispered, and his men. They've found you. Father Michaels moved with unexpected swiftness for his age, guiding Ethan toward a narrow door hidden behind a tapestry. The chapel crypt, he whispered. Quickly, the hidden passage led to stone steps descending beneath the chapel. Ethan followed, cradling Emma protectively as they entered a small, cold chamber where wooden crosses marked simple graves. Wait here, the priest instructed. I will send Waking Dove to you. Alone in the dim crypt, Ethan examined the graves by the light of the single lantern Father Michaels had provided. Most bore names of priests who had served the mission over decades, but one newer marker caught his attention. Thomas Reed, beloved husband and father, healer of bodies and souls. Ethan knelt beside the grave, Emma stirring against him. We found your father, he whispered to her. A soft sound at the entrance made him turn. A young indigenous woman stood watching him, perhaps 20 years old, with intelligent eyes and a guarded expression. She wore a simple mission dress, but the beaded necklace at her throat and the feather woven into her dark braids spoke of her tribal identity. You are the one who found the child, she stated rather than asked, approaching with silent steps. Yes. Are you Waking Dove? She nodded, her gaze fixed on Emma. May I see her? Ethan carefully revealed Emma's face. Waking Dove's stoic expression softened immediately, one finger gently tracing the infant's cheek. She has grown stronger, she observed. When Clara left her, we feared she was too small to survive. You helped Clara birth her? Yes. I was training as a midwife with my people before coming to the mission. Pride briefly flashed in her eyes. It was a difficult birth. Clara was very weak, poisoned slowly over months, we believe. By Hargrove's men? Waking Dove nodded. Clara suspected someone had been tampering with her food during her journey north. By the time she reached us, she could barely stand. The early labor was likely caused by the poison. Yet Emma survived. A miracle, Waking Dove agreed. Dr. Reed arrived just in time. He had medicine's knowledge. He saved them both. Her expression darkened. Until the men came. Tell me what happened, Ethan urged. Waking Dove moved to Thomas Reed's grave, placing a small pouch of herbs beside it, an offering. They came at dawn. For men led by the one you call Blackwood. They demanded Clara and the child be remanded to their custody, claiming Judge Winterfield had legal authority over his daughter. She described the confrontation, how Thomas Reed had stood before the chapel altar, refusing to yield, declaring that Clara was his lawful wife and the child his daughter. How Blackwood had drawn his weapon when Reed attempted to escort them out. The doctor fell there. She pointed to a specific flagstone. Clara screamed and tried to run to him. I took the baby and pulled Clara away, through the same passage you used. We hid in the forest until nightfall. And then, Clara was too weak to travel far with the infant. The birth and shock had left her near collapse. That is when the merchant Webb found us. Found you? How? He claimed to have been sent by the Prestons, the couple Clara trusted in Fort Clearwater. He showed a letter with their signature, offered to take the baby to them while Clara recovered. Waking Dove's eyes flashed with anger. I did not trust him, but Clara was desperate. She knew she could not keep the child safe in her condition. Webb betrayed her, Ethan stated. Sold the box to me instead of delivering Emma to the Prestons. Webb serves whoever pays most, Waking Dove confirmed bitterly. Before he left with the child, Clara gave him something for safekeeping, a bag containing documents, evidence against her father and Hargrove, I believe, and something for her daughter. Above them, footsteps and voices could be heard moving through the chapel. Blackwood was searching the mission methodically. We must leave, Waking Dove whispered. There is another way out through the old mission well. Before they could move, she stopped, remembering something. Wait, there is one more thing you should have. She moved to Thomas Reed's grave and carefully removed a loose stone near its base, retrieving a leather satchel hidden within the wall cavity. Dr. Reed's medical bag, she explained, handing it to Ethan. I hid it here after his death. Inside is his journal. He documented everything, including his suspicions about Judge Winterfield and Hargrove. Ethan opened the satchel, finding a well-worn leather-bound journal among medical instruments. Quickly scanning several pages, he found detailed entries about Clara's pregnancy, symptoms consistent with arsenic poisoning, and Thomas Reed's growing concerns about his father-in-law's intentions. One entry particularly stood out. The old man's condition worsens. Hargrove grows more desperate to secure the Winterfield legacy through marriage to Clara. What began as a business arrangement has become an obsession for him. He cannot accept that Clara chose me instead, nor that our child will be the true Winterfield heir. Another page contained a disturbing observation. Clara reports Hargrove's strange fixation on bloodlines and heredity. He speaks of the Winterfield heritage as if it were a royal lineage to be preserved. I fear his interest in our unborn child stems from more than financial motives. The journal represented a physician's meticulous documentation, evidence that could expose the truth behind Judge Winterfield and Hargrove's pursuit of Clara and Emma. This could protect Emma, Ethan realized, carefully securing the journal inside his coat. Waking Dove nodded. That is why Thomas hid it. He knew they would destroy any evidence. She gestured toward the hidden passage. Now we must go. Blackwood will find this place soon. Waking Dove led Ethan through a narrow tunnel that connected the crypt to an abandoned well behind the mission chapel. Emma remained miraculously quiet, as if sensing the danger around them. Above, they could hear the muffled sounds of Blackwood's men searching, their heavy boots crossing the chapel floor directly overhead. Where is Clara now? Ethan whispered as they crouched in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to emerge. I do not know for certain, Waking Dove admitted. After Webb took the baby, she fled north, drawing the pursuers away from the child's trail. She believed they would assume she still had the infant with her. A diversion, Ethan realized. She sacrificed her safety for Emma's. Clara is woman who fights among my people, Waking Dove said with quiet pride. She earned this name. They emerged from the well house into gathering darkness, the mission buildings silhouetted against the twilight sky. Waking Dove guided them along a nearly invisible path that skirted the mission's perimeter, avoiding the mounted men still searching the main grounds. "We go to my brother's winter camp," she explained once they reached the safety of the forest. 2 hours north. Grey Wolf leads our hunting band. He will help us. The journey through the darkened forest was treacherous, but Waking Dove moved with absolute confidence, finding paths Ethan would have missed entirely. She navigated by subtle landmarks, a distinctive boulder, a bent tree, stars glimpsed through breaks in the canopy. "You've made this journey many times," Ethan observed. "I move between two worlds," she replied simply. "The mission and my people." They reached the hunting camp shortly before midnight, a collection of hide-covered lodges nestled in a protected valley. Dogs announced their arrival, bringing several men with weapons to investigate. Waking Dove called out in her native language, immediately transforming their suspicion to welcome. A tall, powerfully built man stepped forward, Grey Wolf, his resemblance to Waking Dove unmistakable despite his more weathered features. "Sister," he greeted her in English before turning suspicious eyes toward Ethan. "Why do you bring this stranger to our winter camp?" Waking Dove explained rapidly in their shared language, occasionally gesturing toward Emma. Grey Wolf's expression remained impassive, though his gaze softened slightly when he looked at the infant. "The child Clara fought to protect," he said finally, "and now men with guns search for her." "They will not stop," Ethan confirmed. "Judge Winterfield and his associate Hargrove want Emma for reasons beyond a family dispute." Grey Wolf considered this. "Winterfield," he spat the name. "His men force our people from hunting grounds, take land with false papers, corrupt spirits." Inside Grey Wolf's lodge, warmed by a central fire, Waking Dove explained Ethan's discovery of Emma and their narrow escape from the mission. Grey Wolf listened silently, his face revealing nothing until she finished. "Winterfield's men came here 2 days ago," he finally said. "Asked about a woman with baby. Offered money for information." "Did you tell them anything?" Ethan asked. Grey Wolf's expression hardened. "We do not speak with those who steal our land." An elderly woman entered, carrying a small bundle of herbs and medicinal supplies. She spoke rapidly to Grey Wolf, who translated. "Our healer wishes to examine the child. Mission diseases spread easily." Ethan hesitated, then carefully handed Emma to the tribal healer, watching as she unwrapped the swaddling clothes and examined the infant with practiced hands. The woman murmured approvingly, applying a fragrant salve to Emma's chest before rewrapping her. "For strength," Grey Wolf explained. "She says the child is small but has a warrior's spirit." The lodge flap opened again, admitting a younger tribal man whose arm was wrapped in bloodied bandages. Grey Wolf introduced him as Swift Hawk, who had been injured in a hunting accident. Seeing Ethan's medical attention to the wound, Grey Wolf explained that Ethan had been a healer. Ethan examined the deep gash, recognizing signs of early infection. "I can help," he offered, "if you have clean water and bandages." As he treated Swift Hawk's wound, expertly cleaning and redressing it with herbs provided by the tribal healer, Ethan sensed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. His medical skills had bridged a gap, earning cautious acceptance. Later, as they shared a simple meal, Grey Wolf studied Ethan thoughtfully. "Why do you protect this child? She is not your blood." Ethan considered the question. "Because she was entrusted to me. Because her parents died or risked everything to keep her safe." "And when you find Clara, will you return the child?" "Of course," Ethan said, though the admission brought an unexpected pang. "If she's alive." Grey Wolf nodded slowly. "Clara came to us before reaching the mission. She was already sick then, poisoned by the white man's treachery, but strong in spirit. She learned our ways quickly." A rare smile touched his lips. "She told us her child would be born with the heart of two worlds." That night, While Emma slept peacefully in a cradle board provided by the tribal women, the elders gathered to discuss the situation. Though Ethan couldn't understand their language, the gravity of their counsel was evident. Eventually, Grey Wolf approached him. "We will help you reach Fort Clearwater by safer paths," he announced. "Waking Dove will guide you. The child is under our protection now." The tribal healer approached, carrying a small decorated pouch on a leather cord. With gentle ceremony, she placed it around Emma's neck, speaking words that Waking Dove translated. A medicine bundle to guard her spirit on the journey. It contains sacred herbs and a fragment of eagle feather for vision beyond danger. Ethan accepted the gift with appropriate solemnity, recognizing its spiritual significance. Before retiring, Waking Dove presented him with one final item, a hand-drawn map marked with symbols. "Our safe trails to Fort Clearwater," she explained, "marked with signs only our people recognize. Blackwood will not find these paths." Studying the intricate map with its mysterious symbols and carefully noted landmarks, Ethan realized it represented far more than geographical guidance. It was a profound act of trust, the sharing of tribal secrets with an outsider for the protection of a child who united their separate worlds. Dawn brought preparations for departure. The tribal women provided Ethan with a proper cradleboard for Emma, a traditional wooden carrier decorated with protective symbols that could be strapped to his back, leaving his hands free. It was a practical gift that acknowledged the long journey ahead. "My brother will send scouts ahead to ensure the path is clear," Waking Dove explained as they prepared to leave. "Grey Wolf comes with us until the river crossing." As their small party, Ethan, Waking Dove, Grey Wolf, and two younger tribal men prepared to depart, a commotion erupted at the camp's perimeter. A sentry arrived with urgent news, speaking rapidly in the tribal language. Grey Wolf's expression darkened. "The merchant Webb has been spotted nearby," he translated for Ethan. "Traveling alone, heading toward the old trading grounds." "Webb?" Ethan's pulse quickened. "The same man who sold me Emma?" "Yes, the one who betrayed Clara." Grey Wolf exchanged looks with his sister. "This is no coincidence." A plan formed quickly. Rather than proceeding directly toward Fort Clearwater, they would intercept Webb at the abandoned trading grounds, a day's journey east, where fur trappers had once exchanged goods with tribal hunters before the post was abandoned. "Webb may know Clara's fate," Waking Dove pointed out, "and why he sold the child to you instead of delivering her as promised." They traveled swiftly, following game trails through dense forest. Emma, secure in her cradleboard, seemed content with the gentle rocking motion as Ethan moved. By late afternoon, they reached the dilapidated trading post, a clearing containing the collapsed remains of several log structures. "We wait," Grey Wolf decided, directing them to concealed positions surrounding the clearing. Night had fallen when Webb finally appeared, leading a heavily laden pack mule toward the largest remaining structure. He worked quickly to make camp, glancing nervously over his shoulder as if expecting company. After starting a small fire, he produced a bottle and began drinking steadily, occasionally muttering to himself. "He is afraid," Waking Dove whispered, "waiting for someone." When Webb was sufficiently distracted by his bottle, Grey Wolf signaled. The tribal hunters moved with silent efficiency, surrounding the merchant before he realized he wasn't alone. Webb's hand moved toward his pistol, but froze when he found himself looking down the barrel of Ethan's rifle. "Not worth dying over," Ethan advised calmly. Webb's face drained of color as recognition dawned. "Morgan? How did you?" His gaze darted to the cradleboard on Ethan's back, visible now in the firelight. "Oh God, you still have it." "Her," Ethan corrected coldly. "Her name is Emma." Webb licked his lips nervously. "Look, there's been a misunderstanding. That package wasn't meant for you." "I know. You were paid to deliver her to the Prestons in Fort Clearwater." Ethan kept his rifle steady. "Instead, you sold her to me." "Why?" "Business decision," Webb admitted, eyes calculating even in fear. Hargrove offered more for the child than the Prestons promised. But then Blackwood showed up asking questions, and I realized who the baby really was. A sly expression crossed his face. Valuable commodity, that one. Heir to the Winterfield fortune. Grey Wolf stepped forward menacingly, causing Webb to shrink back. "Where is Clara Winters?" he demanded. "How should I know?" Webb's eyes darted between his captors. "She gave me the baby and some papers, then headed north. Blackwood's men were right behind her." "You betrayed her," Waking Dove said, her quiet voice somehow more condemning than Grey Wolf's threatening stance. "It was just business," Webb insisted. "Look, I can make this right. I still have the papers she gave me, kept them as insurance." He reached slowly toward his saddlebag, freezing when all weapons raised simultaneously. "Easy. Just getting what you want." Ethan nodded permission, keeping his rifle trained on Webb as the merchant carefully withdrew a leather portfolio from his bag. "Everything's here. Her evidence against Winterfield and Hargrove, legal documents, letters proving the old judge's corruption." Webb held out the portfolio. "Take it. Consider it compensation for the misunderstanding." Ethan accepted the portfolio with his free hand, keeping his rifle steady. Inside were indeed numerous documents: land deeds with questionable signatures, correspondence between Judge Winterfield and territorial officials, and what appeared to be financial records showing substantial unexplained payments. Most damning was a formal bill of sale, dated just 3 weeks prior, recording Webb's receipt of payment from Frederick Hargrove for a rare specimen, with a description that matched Emma's distinctive birthmark, a small crescent-shaped mark behind her right ear. "You sold her?" Ethan said quietly, a dangerous edge to his voice. "Like property." "It was a delivery fee," Webb protested, "for returning the judge's granddaughter." "The judge is dying," Grey Wolf interjected suddenly. "My people have heard this. A sickness that takes his mind and body." Webb nodded eagerly, seeing a chance to provide valuable information. "Hereditary condition. Runs in the Winterfield line. That's why Hargrove is so desperate to control the child, to control the inheritance before the old man dies." "And Clara? What happens to her in this arrangement?" Ethan demanded. Webb's expression confirmed Ethan's worst fears. "Hargrove said she'd suffered a breakdown after her husband's death, needed to be confined for her own protection. His attempt at solemnity fell flat. Very sad. Confined where?" "The judge's estate outside Fort Clearwater. There's a private wing." Webb trailed off, his gaze shifting beyond Ethan's shoulder. A warning shout from one of the tribal scouts came too late as a shot rang out, sending them all diving for cover. In the chaos, Webb scrambled away, disappearing into the darkness as more shots followed. One of the tribal hunters cried out, clutching his shoulder where a bullet had struck. "Blackwood!" Grey Wolf shouted, returning fire toward the source of the shots. Ethan protected Emma with his body, ensuring the cradle board remained shielded as the brief, intense firefight erupted around them. When silence finally fell, Webb was gone, having escaped during the confusion. "He led them to us," Waking Dove realized, helping Ethan tend to their wounded companion. "Deliberately camped here knowing they would follow. They traveled through the night, pushing themselves to put distance between their group and Blackwood's men." The wounded tribal hunter, Red Fox, insisted he could continue despite Ethan's makeshift treatment of his shoulder. By dawn, they reached a formidable obstacle, a steep river gorge swollen with early spring melt. "Normal crossing impossible now," Grey Wolf stated, surveying the churning waters below. "But there is another way. Dangerous." He led them upstream to where the gorge narrowed slightly. A fallen pine created a precarious natural bridge spanning the chasm, its trunk slick with spray from the rapids below. "We cross here," Grey Wolf decided. "One at a time." Ethan studied the makeshift bridge with concern. "And Emma? I will carry her," Waking Dove offered. I am lighter with better balance. Reluctantly, Ethan transferred the cradle board to Waking Dove, securing it firmly to her back. Grey Wolf crossed first, moving with careful precision despite the treacherous surface. The tribal hunters followed, supporting Red Fox between them. Waking Dove went next, each step measured and deliberate, one hand steadying herself against the trunk. Ethan watched tensely until she reached the other side, Emma still sleeping peacefully in the cradleboard. As Ethan began his own crossing, a distant shout echoed through the gorge. Blackwood's men had found their trail. Hurrying now, Ethan lost his footing on the slippery bark. He plunged sideways, managing to catch himself with one arm hooked around the trunk, legs dangling over the churning water below. Grey Wolf reacted instantly, edging back onto the log bridge. Take my hand. Ethan struggled to pull himself up, bark tearing beneath his fingers. Grey Wolf stretched further, grasping Ethan's wrist in a powerful grip just as Ethan's hold began to fail. With extraordinary strength, Grey Wolf pulled him to safety, both men collapsing on solid ground as gunshots splintered bark where they had been moments before. Thank you, Ethan gasped. Grey Wolf nodded once, accepting the debt without comment. They retreated into the forest as Blackwood's men reached the opposite side of the gorge, unable to follow immediately. By midday, they had reached a small clearing containing the charred remains of a campsite. Grey Wolf examined the ashes with experienced hands. Recent, he concluded. 2-3 days old. Waking Dove discovered a woman's boot print pressed into mud near a fallen log. Small foot, she observed, like Clara's. Searching the area more thoroughly, Ethan found scraps of burned paper in the fire pit, fragments of a diary written in an elegant hand. Though mostly destroyed, certain phrases remained legible. Suspect father has been using territorial funds to purchase. Hargrove's manipulation extends beyond business. Discovered documents proving their involvement in forced relocations. And most disturbingly, bitter taste in my tea again today. Tea. Suspect's deliberate poisoning. Clara was gathering evidence, Ethan realized, against her father and Hargrove. And they tried to silence her, Waking Dove added, examining another fragment. Look, she mentions feeling dizzy, hair falling out, signs of poison. Grey Wolf studied the surrounding area with narrowed eyes. There was struggle here. See, broken branches, disturbed ground. Someone taken by force. The implication hung heavily in the air. If Clara had been here recently, documenting her father's crimes, and was then captured, her situation was dire indeed. As they prepared to continue their journey, Grey Wolf pulled Ethan aside. My people cannot go farther, he explained. Too close to Fort Clearwater. Soldiers there know our faces, blame us for settler troubles. I understand, Ethan assured him. You've risked enough already. Waking Dove will continue with you, Grey Wolf said, glancing at his sister who nodded confirmation. She moves easily between worlds, less noticeable. Before departing, Grey Wolf performed a brief ceremony, making smoke with sacred herbs and passing it over Emma in her cradleboard. For protection, he explained. The child has two paths before her, one of darkness if Hargrove claims her, one of light if she remains free. Ethan accepted the blessing with appropriate reverence, recognizing the sincere concern behind the ritual. As Grey Wolf and his hunters prepared to return to their territory, the tribal leader fixed Ethan with an intense gaze. The Winterfield sickness, he said. It takes the mind before the body, makes one forget who they are, turns them violent. My grandfather saw it in the old judge's father. And Judge Winterfield has it now, Ethan concluded. Grey Wolf nodded. Hargrove fears the child carries this sickness, wants to control her before others discover it. Bad blood, he believes. Is he right? Could Emma have inherited it? Perhaps. But our healer says the child's spirit is strong, unclouded. Grey Wolf's expression softened slightly as he looked at Emma. What matters is not the blood, but how she is raised, by people who see her value beyond inheritance. The tribal hunters departed, melting into the forest with practiced silence. Ethan, Waking Dove, and Emma continued south, following the hand-drawn map toward Fort Clearwater. That evening, as they made camp in a sheltered hollow, Waking Dove shared more about Clara's time with her people. She learned our ways quickly, she recalled, preparing a medicinal tea for Emma. Called herself Woman Without Tribe when she first came. Rejected by her father, separated from her husband, carrying a child in danger. How did she become Woman Who Fights instead? Waking Dove smiled slightly. She stood against 3 men who came looking for her. Had only a knife, but faced them without fear to protect those who sheltered her. Pride colored her voice. My brother gave her the name after that. Said she had warrior's heart in scholar's body. Later, as Emma slept between them, Waking Dove confided a fear that had clearly been troubling her. If we find Clara alive, she may not be the same. Poisons that attack the mind leave marks. And if she has been held captive by those who wish her harm. Ethan nodded grimly, understanding the implication. Clara might be physically alive but mentally broken. Another complication in an already desperate situation. We'll face that when we must, he said, watching Emma's peaceful sleep. For now, we focus on reaching Fort Clearwater alive. The forest grew sparser as they neared more settled territories, making concealment increasingly difficult. Waking Dove's knowledge of hidden paths kept them away from main trails, but their progress slowed considerably. Food supplies dwindled, forcing Ethan to set simple snares while Waking Dove gathered early spring plants to supplement their meals. 2 more days to Fort Clearwater, she estimated as they huddled around a small, smokeless fire. But we must be more cautious now. Many eyes watched these woods. Emma had grown noticeably in their weeks of travel, her face filling out, her cries stronger. The tribal medicine pouch remained around her neck, its herbs occasionally replenished by Waking Dove from plants they found along the way. She thrives despite everything, Waking Dove observed, watching Ethan tend to Emma with practiced ease. You have become like her father. The observation struck Ethan with unexpected force. He had indeed developed instincts for Emma's needs, knowing the difference between her hungry cry and her tired whimper, anticipating when she needed comfort versus stimulation. The bond between them had grown into something profound. I'm just keeping her safe until we find Clara, he replied, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. That night, as Ethan took first watch, he found himself contemplating a future he'd never imagined. One with Emma as a permanent part of his life. If Clara was dead or unable to care for her child, what then? The possibility both frightened and oddly comforted him. He was so absorbed in these thoughts that he almost missed the slight rustling in the underbrush nearby, too deliberate for wildlife. Silently, he moved to wake Waking Dove, pressing a finger to his lips in warning. She understood immediately, gathering Emma and their essential supplies while Ethan positioned himself to confront the intruder. As a shadow moved between trees, Ethan struck, tackling the figure to the ground and pressing his knife to their throat. Grey Wolf, he exclaimed in surprise, recognizing the tribal leader in the moonlight. Release me, Grey Wolf grunted. Ethan immediately withdrew, helping him up. I thought you returned to your people. I did. Grey Wolf brushed himself off, nodding acknowledgement to his sister who had emerged from hiding. But I was followed. Blackwood's men captured 2 hawks. Waking Dove inhaled sharply. Is he alive? Yes. They questioned him, threatened his family. Grey Wolf's expression was grim. He told them about you, about the child, about our plan to reach Fort Clearwater. The betrayal hung heavily in the night air. Ethan checked that Emma remained asleep, undisturbed by the confrontation. How long do we have? Not long. Blackwood knows these woods. He will find us by morning. Then we separate, Ethan decided. You two head north with Emma. I'll create a false trail south. No, Waking Dove protested. Too dangerous for you alone. More dangerous for Emma if we stay together, Ethan countered. Blackwood knows I have her. If I create obvious signs of my passage, he'll follow me instead of searching for you. Grey Wolf studied Ethan thoughtfully. You would risk yourself for the child? Without hesitation. After a moment, Grey Wolf nodded. It is a good plan, but I will create the false trail. I am better at it than you. The three adults looked at each other, the weight of decision heavy between them. Emma stirred in her cradleboard, making soft noises in her sleep. None of those options will work, came a new voice from the darkness. They whirled to find a young indigenous woman emerging from the shadows, bow in hand. Waking Dove gasped in recognition. Night Star? What are you doing here? Following Grey Wolf, the newcomer replied, approaching cautiously. I did not trust his plan to return alone. Grey Wolf's expression darkened. You were told to remain with the band. And you were told not to risk yourself for outsiders, Night Star countered boldly. Yet here you are. My sister is capable of making her own decisions, Night Star interrupted. As am I. She turned to Ethan. Blackwood has men positioned along all trails north and south. They found 2 Hawks tracks leading back to our winter camp and have surrounded the area. The implications were devastating. Not only was their escape compromised, but Grey Wolf's entire band was now in danger. I must return, Grey Wolf said immediately. My people are already moving to the summer grounds, Night Star assured him. I warned them before following you. But Two Hawk's family is being held at the trading post as leverage. The group fell silent, each calculating impossible alternatives. Finally, Waking Dove spoke, her voice unusually hesitant. There is another way, she said quietly, but it requires great trust. She looked directly at Ethan. And sacrifice. What do you mean? He asked. I take Emma alone, through paths only women of my tribe know. Sacred routes used for generations when childbirth comes in dangerous times. She met his gaze steadily. Men are forbidden from these trails. Even Grey Wolf does not know them. And where would you take her? Ethan asked, his throat tight at the thought of separation. To the eastern ridge above Fort Clearwater. From there we can observe without being seen, find the Prestons safely. She paused. But you must create a diversion. Draw Blackwood away completely. He would need to believe I still have Emma, Ethan realized. Waking Dove reached for the medicine pouch around Emma's neck. This contains her scent, her essence. Carry it, and Blackwood's trackers will believe the child remains with you. Grey Wolf nodded slowly. It could work. But if you are caught with the pouch, I'll be killed. Ethan finished matter-of-factly. I understand. Night Star, who had been watching the exchange silently, suddenly spoke. There is another danger. Even if Waking Dove reaches Fort Clearwater safely, how will she find these Prestons without revealing herself? An indigenous woman with a white infant will draw immediate attention. It was a valid concern, one Ethan hadn't considered fully. The final approach would be the most dangerous, requiring Waking Dove to enter a settlement hostile to her people while carrying a child actively being sought by powerful men. As they debated alternatives, Emma awoke fully, her small face scrunching in preparation to cry. Waking Dove quickly took her from the cradleboard, offering comfort with practiced ease. The infant quieted immediately, tiny hands reaching for the familiar face. Dawn brought no resolution to their dilemma. Each plan carried fatal flaws, and time was running desperately short. As they prepared to separate, Waking Dove and Emma taking the hidden women's trails while Ethan, Grey Wolf, and Night Star created diversions in different directions. The distinctive crack of a rifle shot froze them in place. "Too close," Grey Wolf whispered, instantly alert. More shots followed, accompanied by shouts. Not aimed at them, Ethan realized, but at someone else nearby. He gestured for the others to remain hidden while he crept forward to investigate. Through the trees, he glimpsed a small military outpost, a simple stockade with 2 cabins and a corral containing several horses. A group of soldiers in blue uniforms had surrounded a man in civilian clothing, weapons trained on him. Blackwood's men found the army patrol, Ethan reported back to the others. "They're arguing about jurisdiction." "Army outpost?" Grey Wolf's expression darkened. "Bad place. They hunt my people." "Or our salvation," Ethan countered, a desperate plan forming. "I know that officer, Captain Reynolds. We served together in the border conflicts years ago." "You would trust a blue coat?" Grey Wolf asked incredulously. "Not entirely. But Reynolds is a man of principle, and he outranks Blackwood." Ethan watched the confrontation continuing at the outpost. "It's our best chance. I'll approach openly with Emma. Request military protection based on my prior service." Waking Dove's arms tightened protectively around Emma. "If you are wrong, then we've lost nothing compared to our current situation," Ethan finished grimly. "At least within the outpost, Blackwood can't simply murder us and take Emma." After tense discussion, they agreed. Ethan would approach alone with Emma, claiming to be a widowed father traveling to Fort Clearwater. The others would remain hidden, ready to intervene if necessary. "Be watchful," Ethan told them as he carefully took Emma from Waking Dove. "If anything happens to me, get her to the Prestons." The walk to the outpost was the longest of Ethan's life, each step exposing them further. He kept his rifle slung non-threateningly across his back, Emma secured against his chest, her face visible to establish their relationship clearly. "Halt!" called a sentry as Ethan approached the clearing. "Identify yourself." Ethan Morgan, former field medic with the Western Territories Expeditionary Force, he called back. "Seeking assistance from Captain Reynolds." Activity erupted within the stockade. Moments later, a tall officer in his 40s emerged, studying Ethan with cautious recognition. "Morgan," he called. "Ethan Morgan from the Blackfoot campaign?" "The same, Captain," Ethan confirmed, relief washing through him. "Requesting shelter for myself and my daughter." Reynolds approached, visibly surprised by the infant. "I didn't know you had family, Morgan." "Recent development," Ethan replied carefully. "Her mother died shortly after birth. We're traveling to relatives in Fort Clearwater." Reynolds nodded, though his eyes reflected suspicion. "You've chosen a dangerous time to travel. We've had territorial marshals through here hunting fugitives." He gestured toward the stockade gate. "Come inside. You look like you could use a hot meal." Once within the outpost's walls, Ethan noted the minimal garrison, perhaps 8 soldiers total, most looking like green recruits with little frontier experience. In the larger cabin that served as headquarters, Reynolds dismissed his sergeant before addressing Ethan directly. "Now, Morgan, the truth, if you please. That territorial marshal described someone remarkably like you, traveling with a baby that isn't yours." Ethan's heart sank, but he maintained his composure. "Did he mention why he's hunting an infant?" Reynolds leaned back, studying Ethan carefully. "Health quarantine," he claimed. "Something about exposure to tuberculosis requiring the child's isolation." "And you believed that?" "Not particularly," Reynolds admitted. "Blackwood strikes me as a man whose authority has outgrown his integrity. But I'm stationed in this godforsaken outpost to maintain territorial peace, not to interfere in civil matters." Ethan made a swift decision, trusting his instinct about his former comrade. "The child's name is Emma. Her mother is Clara Winters, daughter of Judge Winterfield in Fort Clearwater. Her father was Thomas Reed, a physician murdered at River Point Mission for protecting his wife and newborn daughter." Reynolds's eyebrows rose. Serious accusations. I can prove everything, Ethan continued, producing Thomas Reed's journal and the documents recovered from Webb. Winterfield and his business partner Hargrove want the child because she threatens their control of Clara's inheritance. They've fabricated charges against Clara to maintain guardianship control over her and now her daughter. The captain examined the documents with increasing concern, pausing particularly over the bill of sale that described Emma as property to be delivered. This is disturbing, to say the least. Blackwood works for them, Ethan pressed. He's a territorial marshal using his authority to pursue their private vendetta. Reynolds set the papers down, his expression troubled. I can offer temporary sanctuary while I verify these claims. But understand, Morgan, if official orders come through requiring me to turn over the child, my options become limited. I understand, Ethan said, feeling marginally safer within the stockade walls. There's something else you should know. Clara Winters is alive or was recently being held against her will at the Winterfield estate outside Fort Clearwater. A serious charge of unlawful imprisonment, Reynolds noted. If true, the Prestons in Fort Clearwater can verify parts of this story, Ethan added. They were arranged to care for Emma until Clara could safely reclaim her. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. I know James Preston, respectable merchant, serves on the town council. He stood, decision made. You and the child can stay in the infirmary building. I'll assign Private Collins to assist with any needs. He has younger siblings, knows something about infant care. As Reynolds led him to the small building that served as the outpost's medical facility, Ethan spotted a communications officer returning to the headquarters cabin, dispatch papers in hand. Expecting orders? Ethan asked casually. Supply requisitions, most likely, Reynolds replied. We're understaffed and undersupplied out here. Territorial government has little interest in outposts this remote. In the simple but clean infirmary, Ethan settled Emma on a cot while Reynolds sent for food and fresh water. Once they were alone, Ethan checked every window and door, calculating escape routes if necessary. I hope I've made the right decision trusting him, he whispered to Emma, who watched him with curious eyes. But we needed an ally with authority. Outside, he could see the soldiers going about their duties, unaware of the drama unfolding in their midst. Somewhere in the surrounding forest, Waking Dove, Grey Wolf, and Night Star were watching, waiting to intervene if necessary. For the moment, they had sanctuary. But Ethan knew such respites were typically brief in his experience. Blackwood would return, likely with official documentation demanding Emma's surrender. When that happened, Reynolds's principles would be tested against his duty, and Ethan would once again need to make impossible choices to keep Emma safe. Ethan spent the day assisting in the outpost's infirmary, treating soldiers with winter ailments while keeping Emma close. His medical skills quickly earned respect from the garrison, particularly when he successfully lanced an infected wound that had been plaguing one young private for weeks. Captain Reynolds visited in the afternoon, bringing news that troubled Ethan deeply. Blackwood returned with reinforcements, Reynolds reported quietly, and documentation signed by the territorial governor designating the child as a ward of the court, to be remanded immediately to Judge Winterfield's custody. Ethan's hands stilled in their work of preparing willow bark tea. The governor himself? So it appears. Reynolds's expression remained carefully neutral. He claims the child requires specialized medical care only available at the Winterfield estate, due to a hereditary condition. They're using the Winterfield illness as justification, Ethan realized. Clever. Is there such a condition? Reynolds asked. Yes, but Emma shows no symptoms. Ethan met the captain's gaze directly. This is about control of her inheritance. Nothing more. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. I've requested verification of the orders from Fort Clearwater headquarters. That buys us until tomorrow morning at least. After the captain departed, Ethan checked on Emma, sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle the soldiers had constructed from a supply crate. The simple kindness of rough frontier men toward an infant had surprised and touched him. As night fell, Private Collins brought their evening meal, lingering afterward to share stories about his younger siblings back home in Pennsylvania. The young soldier's chatter provided welcome distraction from Ethan's growing anxiety. "Sir," Collins said suddenly, voice dropping to a whisper, "there's something you should know. Marshal Blackwood's been asking questions about you around the camp, offering money for information." Ethan tensed. "What kind of questions?" "About your relationship to the baby. Whether you seemed like her real father." Collins glanced nervously toward the door. "And he's got men watching the infirmary. Not supposed to tell you that." "Thank you, Collins," Ethan said sincerely. "I won't forget this." After the private left, Ethan extinguished all but one small lamp, positioning himself where he could watch both Emma and the door. He kept Thomas Reed's journal close, along with his rifle, prepared for whatever might come. Near midnight, a soft scratching at the window alerted him. Moving silently, he approached, relieved to find waking Dove's face in the dim light. "Quick!" she whispered after he eased the window open. "Gray Wolf has created a diversion on the eastern perimeter. We must move now. Where's Night Star?" "Watching Blackwood. He received a messenger an hour ago and has been preparing to move." Her expression grew urgent. "He plans to take the outpost at dawn, with or without the captain's cooperation." Ethan gathered Emma, wrapping her securely. "Reynolds is an honorable man. He won't simply hand her over without proper authority." "Then he will die," Waking Dove stated flatly. "Blackwood has 20 men. The outpost has 8. The math is simple." As Ethan prepared to pass Emma through the window to Waking Dove, the infirmary door opened. He spun, rifle raised, to find Captain Reynolds standing in the doorway, his own pistol drawn but pointed downward. "I thought you might attempt something like this," Reynolds said quietly, closing the door behind him. "Your indigenous friends aren't as invisible as they believe." Waking Dove had vanished from the window, leaving Ethan alone to face the captain. "I can't let Blackwood take her," Ethan said simply. Reynolds holstered his pistol with a sigh. "I received the verification I requested from Fort Clearwater. The orders are genuine, signed by Governor Williams himself." Ethan's heart sank. "The governor is in Winterfield's pocket." "So it would seem." Reynolds reached into his coat, withdrawing an elegant pocket watch that he placed on the table between them. "Do you know what this is, Morgan?" Ethan studied the gold timepiece, noting the ornate W engraved on its case. "Winterfield's. Judge Winterfield's personal watch. A family heirloom passed through generations." Reynolds opened the case, revealing a hidden compartment containing a lock of dark hair and a miniature portrait of a beautiful woman. "Given to me by Blackwood himself, as a token of the judge's appreciation for my cooperation." "You've been bought," Ethan concluded, grip tightening on his rifle. "Offered payment," Reynolds corrected, "which makes me curious about the value of this child to such powerful men." He studied Emma's sleeping face. "Blackwood was unusually interested in my family history during our conversation. Asked about my mother repeatedly." Something in Reynolds's tone made Ethan reassess the situation. "Your mother, Elizabeth Winterfield, before her marriage." Reynolds met Ethan's startled gaze. "The judge's sister, which makes him my uncle, though we've had no contact since my mother married beneath her station." The implications stunned Ethan. "You're part of the Winterfield bloodline." "Apparently so." Reynolds's expression hardened. "Blackwood carries the Winterfield traits, same eyes, same distinctive hairline." When I mentioned the resemblance, he became agitated, then overly familiar. Called me cousin, when no one else could hear. "He's Winterfield's illegitimate son," Ethan realized. working to secure his own inheritance by eliminating Clara's claim through Emma. Reynolds nodded grimly. Family politics I want no part of. But I cannot simply ignore legal orders, no matter how corrupt their origins. So we're trapped. Not necessarily. Reynolds moved to the window, scanning the darkness outside. Your friends are resourceful. The woman has circled to the back of the infirmary. The man has created quite an effective diversion. My men are all occupied with a mysterious fire at the eastern fence line. Hope flickered in Ethan's chest. You're helping us escape? I'm not preventing the escape of individuals who overpowered me while I was conducting a routine inspection. Reynolds removed his sidearm, placing it on the table. You should take this. I would have defended myself naturally. Ethan hesitated, studying the man who was risking his career to do what was right. Why? Reynolds touched the pocket watch briefly. Because I've seen what obsession with the Winterfield legacy does to men. I want no part of it. He stepped back from the window. You have perhaps 10 minutes before my sergeant completes his patrol circuit. Thank you, Ethan said simply, gathering Emma and the essential documents. One more thing, Reynolds added as Ethan prepared to exit through the window. My dispatch rider leaves for Fort Clearwater at first light with my reports. I've included copies of Dr. Reed's journal entries and the bill of sale for the child. Evidence should reach the territorial judge by tomorrow evening. Winterfield is the territorial judge, Ethan reminded him. Judge Hollister in the Northern District is not, and he despises Winterfield. Reynolds smiled thinly. Family politics can work both ways, Morgan. They traveled through the night, following Night Star's expert guidance toward Fort Clearwater. By dawn, they could see the settlement in the valley below, a substantial town with proper streets, wooden sidewalks, and brick buildings among the more common wooden structures. The Winterfield estate stood apart, a sprawling mansion on the northern outskirts surrounded by manicured grounds and a high stone wall. How do we find the Prestons without being seen? Ethan asked, studying the town through Reynolds's field glass. I cannot enter, Waking Dove stated flatly. My kind are not welcome except on trading days, and even then, only in designated areas. Grey Wolf, who had rejoined them after creating the diversion at the outpost, nodded agreement. For us to be seen with a white infant would bring immediate danger. I'll go alone, Ethan decided. As a doctor seeking consultation, Night Star, who had been scanning the roads leading to town, suddenly tensed. Riders coming from the outpost, moving fast. Blackwood, Ethan confirmed, recognizing the marshal's distinctive coat through the field glass. He'll raise the alarm, have the whole town watching for us. We need a different approach, Grey Wolf said thoughtfully. Night Star and I will create a diversion at the south gate. Draw attention away from the northern entrance near the Winterfield estate. And I go directly to the estate instead of searching for the Prestons? Ethan guessed. Grey Wolf nodded. Find Clara. With her, you have legitimacy no one can question. The plan was desperate but offered their only chance of success. Using a medical bag supplied by Reynolds and appropriate attire borrowed from the outpost stores, Ethan could pass as a specialist called to consult on Judge Winterfield's condition. Emma, quieted with honey water, was bundled against him beneath his coat. Be cautious, Waking Dove warned as they prepared to separate. Clara may not be herself. If she has been drugged or mistreated. I understand, Ethan assured her. I'll find her whatever her condition. They parted at midday, Grey Wolf and Night Star heading toward the southern entrance, while Ethan and Waking Dove circled toward the northern approach. When they reached the road leading to the Winterfield estate, Waking Dove embraced Emma one last time. She carries the protection of my people, she said solemnly. Remember that when facing those who would harm her. I will, Ethan promised. If I don't return by nightfall, we will come for you, she finished simply. All of us. Ethan approached the Winterfield estate openly, medical bag in hand, Emma concealed beneath his coat. The elaborate iron gates stood open, with 2 guards stationed at the entrance. He adopted the confident bearing of a medical professional as he nodded to them. "Dr. Ethan Morgan," he announced, "summoned to consult on Judge Winterfield's condition." The guards exchanged uncertain glances. "We weren't informed of any appointment," one began. "Captain Reynolds at the Northern Outpost sent for me specifically," Ethan explained smoothly. "The judge's condition has reportedly worsened. I have experience with similar cases in Eastern practice." The mention of Reynolds, a name they recognized, and the apparent urgency of the medical situation persuaded them. One guard escorted Ethan up the long drive toward the imposing house. Inside, the wealth of the Winterfield family was immediately apparent. Imported furnishings, expensive artwork, uniformed staff moving efficiently through grand rooms. "Wait here," the guard instructed, leaving Ethan in an opulent sitting room while he informed the household of their visitor. Alone briefly, Ethan surveyed his surroundings, noting potential exits and the layout of the main floor. A large family Bible rested on a central table, its leather binding worn from generations of use. Unable to resist, Ethan quickly examined it, finding the Winterfield family records meticulously documented for over a century. Clara's birth was recorded in elegant script, as was her marriage to Thomas Reed, though someone had later attempted to ink out this entry. Most telling was a blank space where Emma's birth should have been recorded, as if her very existence was being erased from family history. "Dr. Morgan?" A cultured voice interrupted his examination. Ethan turned to find an impeccably dressed man in his 50s observing him with calculated interest. Though not introduced, Ethan immediately recognized Frederick Hargrove from descriptions in Thomas Reed's journal. The aristocratic bearing, the cold eyes assessing everything with proprietary interest. "Mr. Hargrove," Ethan acknowledged, watching surprise flicker across the man's features at being recognized. "You have me at a disadvantage," Hargrove recovered smoothly. "You know me, yet I don't recall making your acquaintance." "Your reputation precedes you," Ethan replied. "I understand you managed Judge Winterfield's affairs during his illness." "Indeed." Hargrove studied him with growing suspicion. "Though I don't recall requesting a medical consultation. Captain Reynolds believed the judge's condition warranted specialized attention." Ethan maintained his professional demeanor despite Emma shifting slightly beneath his coat. "I have particular experience with hereditary nervous conditions." Interest sparked in Hargrove's eyes. "Indeed? Then perhaps you might offer insights." "The judge's health has deteriorated rapidly these past months." "I'd be pleased to examine him," Ethan said, taking a calculated risk. "And perhaps his daughter as well? I understand Mrs. Reed has also been unwell." Hargrove's expression hardened momentarily before he forced a concerned smile. "Poor Clara has suffered a complete mental collapse following her husband's tragic accident. She's under sedation for her own protection." "All the more reason for a fresh medical assessment," Ethan pressed. "Perhaps," Hargrove conceded reluctantly. "The judge first, however." "This way, doctor." As Hargrove led him deeper into the house, Ethan remained hyper-aware of Emma's presence against his chest and the increasing difficulty of maintaining their deception. Each step took them further from escape routes, deeper into the heart of enemy territory. They ascended a grand staircase to the mansion's second floor, where Hargrove paused before massive double doors. "The judge's condition has rendered him volatile at times. You should prepare yourself." The bedroom beyond was darkened, heavy curtains blocking all but a sliver of daylight. The air smelled of illness and medicinal tonics. In a massive canopied bed lay an emaciated figure, once powerful, now ravaged by disease. Judge Winterfield's sunken eyes fixed on Ethan with unexpected clarity as Hargrove introduced him. Despite his physical deterioration, intelligence still burned in that gaunt face, along with something darker that sent a chill through Ethan. "Another doctor?" the judge rasped. Come to prod and poke and pronounce the inevitable? Judge Winterfield has good days and bad, Hargrove explained smoothly. Today appears to be challenging. Ethan approached the bedside, medical bag in hand. I specialize in hereditary conditions, Your Honor. With your permission, I'd like to conduct a brief examination. The judge waved a skeletal hand in dismissive permission. As Ethan began a basic assessment, he noted the classic symptoms described in Thomas Reed's journal: tremors, cognitive fluctuations, muscle wasting. The Winterfield disease was indeed real, and in its advanced stages. You're not from around here, Judge Winterfield observed shrewdly. Frontier doctor by your hands, but educated somewhere proper. East Coast. Boston, Ethan confirmed, maintaining his professional facade, while acutely aware of Emma shifting slightly beneath his coat. Came west for adventure? Or running from something? The judge's penetrating gaze belied his physical weakness. Men come west for one of those two reasons, in my experience. Before Ethan could respond, Emma made a soft sound, barely audible but enough to capture the judge's attention. His eyes narrowed, focusing on Ethan's coat. What was that? He demanded. The judge's hearing has become quite sensitive, Hargrove interjected, moving closer. A common symptom of his condition. I'm not deaf, Hargrove, Winterfield snapped. And I'm not yet senile. There was a sound. His suspicious gaze remained fixed on Ethan. What are you hiding, doctor? The moment of deception was over. Carefully, Ethan opened his coat, revealing Emma secured in her carrier against his chest. Your granddaughter, Judge Winterfield. The old man's expression transformed. Shock, disbelief, and something like wonder crossing his features. Clara's child, he whispered. She lived. No thanks to those who sought to prevent it, Ethan replied evenly. Hargrove had frozen, his calculated composure shattered by this unexpected development. This is preposterous, he began. This man has clearly abducted. Be silent, the judge commanded with surprising strength. Let me see her. Bring her closer. Ethan carefully lifted Emma from her carrier, supporting her head as he held her where the judge could see her properly. Winterfield's trembling hand reached out, one finger gently touching her cheek. She has the Winterfield eyes, he murmured. Like Clara. Like my Elizabeth. His gaze sharpened, focusing on Ethan with renewed intensity. How did you come to have her? Where is my daughter? Being held somewhere in this house, according to my information, Ethan answered directly, while Hargrove and Marshal Blackwood eliminated anyone who might interfere with their plans for your estate. Outrageous lies, Hargrove protested, though his hand had moved to his jacket pocket where Ethan suspected a weapon was concealed. Judge, this man is clearly deranged. Clara's child died at birth. We received confirmation weeks ago. Then who is this infant? Winterfield demanded. With my family's distinctive features? Before Hargrove could respond, the bedroom door burst open. Marshal Blackwood entered, weapon drawn, followed by two armed men. His triumphant expression faltered momentarily at seeing Emma in Ethan's arms before the judge. Ah, Marshal. Excellent timing. Hargrove recovered quickly. This man has infiltrated the estate with a kidnapped child. Arrest him immediately. No. Judge Winterfield's voice cracked like a whip despite his frailty. I will hear this man's account first. There's no time for this, Uncle, Blackwood said, revealing their relationship openly for the first time. We have reliable information that indigenous hostiles are approaching the estate. The child must be secured immediately. The room froze at Blackwood's slip. Judge Winterfield's eyes narrowed as he processed the familiar address. Uncle, he repeated. What claim have you to such familiarity, Marshal? Hargrove attempted intervention. Judge, your condition is causing confusion. My mind is perfectly clear, Winterfield snapped. clear enough to recognize my sister's eyes in this man's face. Elizabeth's boy, are you? The one she bore that cavalry officer against my wishes. Blackwood's expression hardened. Your bastard, not hers. Or have you conveniently forgotten your youthful indiscretion with your sister's chambermaid? My mother never forgot, even as she raised me to serve your interests in ways your legitimate heirs could not. The shocking revelation silenced the room. Judge Winterfield's face had drained of color, his hands trembling violently now. All this time, he whispered. You knew. I've always known, Blackwood confirmed bitterly, as has Hargrove, who found me useful in managing your complicated family matters. A commotion erupted elsewhere in the house. Shouts, running footsteps. Hargrove moved toward the door, but it burst open before he reached it. Grey Wolf and Night Star entered, weapons ready, followed by Captain Reynolds in full uniform. The house is surrounded, Reynolds announced, by both military and territorial authorities. He nodded acknowledgement to Ethan before addressing the judge formally. Judge Winterfield, I have orders from Judge Hollister of the Northern District to investigate allegations of unlawful imprisonment, attempted kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit murder. This is absurd, Hargrove blustered. You have no jurisdiction here. Federal jurisdiction supersedes territorial when federal crimes are alleged, Reynolds countered, including the murder of a physician at a federally funded mission settlement. As tensions escalated, a slight figure appeared in the doorway behind Reynolds. A young woman in a plain dress, her face pale but determined, her gray-blue eyes instantly recognizable as identical to Emma's. Father, she said simply, her gaze fixed on Judge Winterfield. Clara? The old man breathed, reaching toward her with trembling hands. Clara Winters Reed moved to her father's bedside, her movements suggesting recent illness but her eyes clear and focused. When she saw Emma in Ethan's arms, her composure finally broke. My baby, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. You found her. She found me, Ethan corrected gently, transferring Emma into her mother's waiting arms. As Clara held her daughter for the first time in weeks, Judge Winterfield witnessed the reunion with conflicted emotions playing across his ravaged face. I never intended, he began, then stopped. Hargrove convinced me you were unwell, that the child would inherit my condition. You were manipulated, Father, Clara said softly. But you allowed it because you couldn't accept my choices. The judge's expression crumpled with the weight of recognition. With visible effort, he addressed Reynolds. Captain, arrest Hargrove and Blackwood. I wish to make a full statement regarding their actions. Before anyone could move, Blackwood lunged toward Clara and Emma, desperation making him reckless. The child is mine by right of blood, he shouted. More Winterfield than this disobedient daughter ever was. Grey Wolf intercepted him with fluid precision, disarming him with a swift, practiced movement. As Blackwood struggled in the tribal leader's powerful grip, the pocket watch fell from his coat, Judge Winterfield's heirloom that he had shown to Reynolds at the outpost. In the chaotic aftermath, as Hargrove and Blackwood were restrained and Judge Winterfield gave his formal statement to Reynolds, Clara took Ethan aside. Emma slept peacefully in her arms, unaware of the dramatic events surrounding her young life. How can I ever repay you? Clara asked, her voice thick with emotion. You saved her when everyone else betrayed us. She saved me, Ethan admitted, gave me purpose when I had none. 6 months later, Ethan stood on the porch of his expanded cabin, watching Clara teach Emma to reach for wildflowers growing along the cleared path. The judge had passed away weeks after the confrontation, his final acts including signed affidavits exposing Hargrove's corruption and formal recognition of Emma as his legitimate heir. Clara's health had gradually improved away from the poisons that had nearly claimed her life, though she would never regain her full strength. She had made a difficult but clear-eyed decision, recognizing both her limitations and the bond that had formed between Ethan and Emma during their journey. The adoption papers lay on Ethan's table inside legal documents naming him as Emma's guardian alongside Clara, ensuring the child would always have protection should Clara's health fail again. Waking Dove arrived weekly, bringing tribal remedies for Clara and stories for Emma. Grey Wolf's band had secured legitimate rights to their traditional hunting grounds as part of the settlement with territorial authorities, using the evidence of corruption Ethan had gathered. Home, Emma spoke her first word clearly, reaching toward the cabin as the morning sun crested the mountain ridge, bathing the small homestead in golden light. Yes, Clara agreed, smiling at Ethan across the distance. Home.